Today is the last day of 2022, and what a better way to kick off the new year than to cover the recently held Logiker 2022 Christmas competition. This year's competition was to write a program that displays this Christmas snowflake using any language on any computer, but try to make the program as short and succinct as possible. I love these types of competitions because it challenges you to put your thinking cap on, and it brings together the community, literally hundreds of people participating. It's great to see all the creative ideas and various techniques used. It's a friendly competition. All entries of any size are welcome. Logiker recently posted the results of the competition, stating there were 250 submissions. I will place a link in the description in case you would like to download and examine the results for yourself. I wanted to focus this video primarily on the Commodore 64 entries, mostly basic and assembly creations. I thought we could take a look at most of the Commodore entries in the order they appeared on Logiker's results video, which for the most part were from largest to smallest in byte size. We will examine the code and see it execute. I will try to keep it to like 15 to 20 seconds per entry. We'll see how it goes. I apologize in advance for omitting the VIC-20 entries. Alright, first up in the basic category is Jader. His entry is 528 bytes, and then he has this description right here. He's saying, hey, I know it's not optimized for speed. So let's take a look at it and see how it runs. Very nice, very nice. Alright, next up in the basic category is back to the 8-bit with 1005 bytes. And there is his program up there, and he has a really lengthy description in his file ID. Well, let's check it out and see what it does. This one's sort of unique in the category because it has this effect here, which is kind of cool. All right, next up in the basic category is Tiger 1X, and you can see his program looks completely different. I think a lot of these programs will start to look the same as we get further along. This one is 297 bytes, and he just says to run it. There's nothing special. It creates 3 loops. The code goes through 3 loops, creates the stars for the specified lines. Each of the 3 loops is responsible for a specific part of the star, upper, middle, and lower part. I had fun. Oh, and it's very fast. Alright, next up is Bits, and his program clocks in at 283 bytes. I got it down to 15 lines, to 5, then to 3, which I am pleased with, so let's check it out. And as you can see, it runs very fast, but look, essentially it's not doing any calculations, it's just printing the star, so that's why it's so fast. Next up in the basic category is Dr. Prodigy. His program clocks in at 219 bytes. In his description, he says the code is written in BASIC v2 and is designed to be as short as possible. So let's check it out. Very nice. Let's take a look at the listing again. Next up is the entry by Commodore. It clocks in at 213 bytes, and in his description he says this program is based on the method of drawing 4 overlapping triangles, which is a theme that's going to repeat over and over today. Nice. How many ways can we draw a triangle? Alright, next up is Goblinish, and it comes in at 206 bytes, and it's 3 lines of basic code. Binary data stored in $. I use symmetry for draw star. Beautifully done. Next up is Danalog, which came in at 196 bytes. This particular one was programmed for the Commodore 128, and there's a lot of instructions here, but we're just going to run the PRG. Nicely done. Next up is Lomascolo, 171 bytes. If you use Vice after drag and drop, run the program immediately. It would be better to clear the screen and run again. This program places the asterisks symmetrically in all directions starting from pre-calculated points. Oh, nice. I like the way that one draws in. Nicely done. All right, next up was done by Jonathan Harston for the Commodore 64 in BBC Basic. 160 bytes. It shows it like this. I can't run this program. It's not written for 64 Basic, but he included some images, or an image of the output, and there it is. The next one I mistakenly had on my list was also his entry, but it was for BBC Basic, so I'm going to skip to number 12. Next up is entry number 12, which is by Wolfchild. It is 150 bytes, apparently, and he says, I use direct screen memory addresses to poke stars onto the screen. I draw 4 13 by 13 triangles which overlap each other. Nicely done. Next up is by RunStop64. He says it's 125 bytes, runs on real hardware, just 3 lines of code. Let's check it out. Very nicely done. For some reason we have that error. On to the next one. Next up is Corsair 1973. He doesn't have a file ID, so let's just watch it run. Very nice. Next up is Joseph, 120 bytes. Draws 4 triangles, 13 characters long, from 4 different corners for the star. Also really nicely done. Next up is Lomascolo. His Commodore 128 entry says it's 95 bytes. Nice. Next up is ROMWare at 95 bytes. No wizardry, just drawing 4 large triangles in 4 different ways. Nicely done. Next up is Loki at 90 bytes. Program draws 5 stars from bigger to smaller. Each star is drawn 1 by 1, continuous draw consisting of 8 lines. Clever. Nicely done. Next up is the entry by Lomasco, 85 bytes. This is for the Commodore Plus 4. This program traces X and Y lines with the asterisks from pre-calculated offsets. Let's check it out. Pretty cool. Let's clear the screen. Well, almost clear. Very cool. All right, entry number 20 for basic is by Sven Bastrop, 85 bytes. Starting from the middle of the star, the program uses 2 loops from -8 to +8. The program checks if the absolute value of the row loop variable or the absolute value of the column loop variable is less than 5. Let's check it out. Nicely done. Next up is by Paco, 84 bytes. The star symmetry is handled via an absolute value. Plots stars around center via an if condition compressed on 2 lines. Makes it hard to edit on device. Let's see if it runs. Oh, that's interesting. It's displaying vertically. I like that. Nicely done. Next one's by Gearstrom, 79 bytes. Has a nice description right here. It's a 1-liner. Let's check it out. Let's draw on the right-hand side first. Oh, I see. 2, 3, and then 4 overlapping triangles. Beautifully done. Let's see how that one line looks. Listed here. Next one up is by Club77, and he has a really long explanation here, and it's a one-liner. Let's check it out. Looks similar to the way the last one drew, except quicker. Next one up is by Krill, 71 bytes. Arithmetically symmetries exploited via an ABS merge via Boolean operations. Doesn't get more cryptic than that. Well, until you see the code. We just look at that top line, and it's a really nice job, but there was like 3 or 4 different versions of this. I guess the shortest was 71 bytes. Next up is from the host of the competition, Logiker, coming in at 70 bytes. It's one line of code. It paints character by character, line by line, and decides it has to be a star or a space. The formula becomes easier as the center of the star is used as center of the coordinates. Nicely done. Next one up is by Serato at 68 bytes. Takes the functional approach, iterates over y equals -8 to +8, x equals -8 to 31, prints asterisk unless an absolute value, blah, blah, blah. Let's just see how it runs. Nicely done. I think this is the shortest basic Commodore 64 basic version here. Now I'm going to show you the one that won for the basic. So this one was the shortest. I added the little rim statement just so I could load it in. And it wasn't in Commodore Basic. It came in at 49 bytes. It was for BBC Micro and BBC Basic. And it was done by David Payne. He has a long explanation of his program right here. And let's see if I can show a screenshot of that. That's what it looks like when it runs. So very nicely done. Only 49 bytes. Beat out all the Commodore people. Now we're on to the assembly language sections. To start off my assembly language section, I wanted to actually show a C language program. This first one was done by IcePick, and it's 183 bytes. And we can see it executing here. So it's actually pretty fast. The next one is 1338 bytes. It's by malVCR. I just wanted to show that you can write programs in other languages. And that one's in C language. And then the third one is by Solar Breeze. It's listed at 7,764 bytes. Let's see if we have a list. So that's interesting. I don't understand some of this code, even though I do know C language. So I thought it was very interesting that I wanted to show it off. Now we'll move on to the assembly language. First up is Kodi. And I'll have to run the program to determine its length. That's Kodi's program. Very nicely done. 143 bytes. Next up is Swilcot. Let's run this one. Very nice. And it's clocking in at 127 bytes. Next up is Sir Joe. Sir Joe's is 130 bytes. And let's run it. Very fast, very nice. All these should be fast. The fifth entry is from Not a Wizard. Let's look at his. It's 129 bytes. Goes through data which has character repetition counters, then uses that information to display the characters on the screen. Very nicely done. Next up is Patrice Carrere. And even though this is supposed to be assembly language, let's see what he says. He says it's 116 bytes, but he wrote a program in BASIC. So I have to go to his, I brought it in over here. He wrote a program in BASIC, and I have to run that in order to run the assembly language portion. And that's how that one works, which is weird. I'm not sure why he like backported it into BASIC like that. Next up is DDI star. This one is 98 bytes. Auto starts on load and implements a couple of loops that refer to tables for print length and next print position. Let's see if we can't find his executable and run it. Let's look at his results. Apparently he did have it running at some point. So that one was apparently entered in machine language. It says no hex into a hex editor, no assemblers were used. So he did this one, old school. Oh, next up is my entry. I incorrectly submitted it as 86 bytes, but in actuality it's 87 bytes. And I have a little description down there, but basically I just put the snowflake in binary and I looped through the bits in order to display the snowflake. Oops. So there it is. Next up is Ice Pick. His came in at 71 bytes. Basically a short RLE unpacker that alternates between painting spaces and STRs for each run. Let's see if I can get this to execute. That's interesting how it's splitting the screen there. And that's his implementation. Let's see if his screenshot looks any different. And let's see how his program runs. That's the one he included, so he's doing what mine's doing. Next up is Zarius. Zarius came in at 64 bytes. Has a nice little description down here. They do the -8 to +8 loop. There it is, nicely done. Next up is Loki. And it clocks in at 65 bytes. The program draws 5 stars from smaller to bigger. Each star is drawn one by one continuous row consisting of 8 lines. So let's check it out when we run it. Pretty good. Next up is Will. Will's program clocks in at 61 bytes. This program contains 2 lists encoding the star's upper half in the form number of spaces and number of asterisks. 2 such bytes are specified for each line. Let's run that. F7. Is that 248? There it is. All right. Next up is Frostbite. Coming in at 54 bytes. He has a really detailed description in his file ID. Let's check it out. Comes in from the top and scrolls down. You like that? Very cool. Next up is Krill, which is at 51 bytes. It does a table lookup, vertical mirroring via stack middle column from magic ROM area. Looks interesting here. It looks like half of the symmetry. Let's run it. Very nice. All right, entry 15 is by Gears. Code is 50 bytes. And It says it displays the star on the screen by drawing 4 partly overlapping triangles. And there's a little more description there. But let's see if we can get this to run. It happens so fast you can't even tell. So almost a little more exciting to run these in BASIC, but it's just neat how succinct and short the code is getting. The further we go here, we're almost at the end. Next up is Christopher Jam. This one is clocking in at 46 bytes. Loops over all the points in a triangle, plotting each one rotated 4 times around the center of the star. Now, in my version here, I added this basic upstart just to get it to run. Let's watch it run. You see how it kind of draws in? Get a quick glimpse of it when it runs. Boom. All right, now let's show off the smallest Commodore 64 program that was submitted. It's done by Serato. And Serato's program is 34 bytes, which is amazing. The required octogram may be constructed as the union of 4 right triangles reflected 4 ways on X and Y axes. A subroutine renders 1 row of the triangle plus its horizontal mirror image. The main loop iterates over normal and mirror image screen rows. The result is all 4 triangles being rendered on top of each other. Let's run it. And there it is. Now, I was in contact with Serato on Discord, and he's told me that he has a newer version of this program, which has clocked in at 32 bytes. So let's run it. Much different program, how it's slower, but it saves 2 bytes. So those are all the entries for the Logiker Christmas challenge here to draw the Christmas star. And I don't know, I had a lot of fun looking through everyone's program, and I learned a lot. I will say that when I did my program source, when I wrote my code, the first essentially version of the program I just went with, and unfortunately I was guessing that the winning entry would be about 40 something bytes, but I never expected someone to come in at 32 bytes. So Serato's entry has blown me away. Now, as good as Serato's entry is, it was actually not the shortest, and it was not the winning entry for the whole competition. There was actually an entry for the Z80, which came in much smaller than his at only 27 bytes. 27 bytes. Essentially, what you have to do is here, you have to ignore the stub code up here and the code that follows. So the main program loop is right here. So from 1 all the way down to 27. So someone has coded this. This is for a ZX81 in 27 bytes. So I'm still super impressed with Serato's entry, but this one is amazing as well. Anyway, I just wanted to thank Logiker for running this competition. I had a lot of fun going through everyone's program and source code and watching it run and all these different basic versions. I hope he continues putting these on once in a while. They are very fun to do. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thanks for watching.